Introducing CheckPoint NGX R65. Welcome to our video training series on CheckPoint NGX R65, the latest update to CheckPoint's already tried and tested security product. Now, I will point out straight away before we get into the nuts and bolts of configuring CheckPoint NGX R65 that some of the things that I'll touch on briefly in this video may not be all that interesting, but they might be required knowledge for the exam, such as marketing type information that CheckPoint use. Of course, this isn't required to know this stuff to manage your firewalls, but if it does come up on the exam, then you'll be glad that you came across it. I will also mention that if you are planning on sitting the CCSA exam, then you will need to have spent some time with CheckPoint firewalls. Just simply reading the manuals isn't enough, as CheckPoint have produced a challenging exam for most people, and what makes this certification worthwhile is the fact that it's not a typical exam whereby you can just read a few test questions and be ready. CheckPoint expects you to have demonstrated experience with the product, so do the right thing by yourself and learn the product well, and then you should do fine in the exam. Now, firstly, as part of CheckPoint's unified security architecture, you might see this pure table listed around the place. Now, this is a good example of something that's more marketing than required knowledge for configuring your firewall, but again, it's worth knowing. So pure simply stands for protected, unified, reliable, and extensible. And of course, it's this unified architecture that allows all CheckPoint products in your entire organization to be monitored and managed from a single console, which not only makes managing the various devices easier, but it allows you to update large deployments faster. Now, one of the things that's often confusing is where do CheckPoint's various products fit into the overall range of products? Which one should you be using? Well, to borrow a graphic from CheckPoint themselves, this is where each product fits into each market segment. From the recently acquired Zone Alarm, which is a popular consumer firewall designed for home users, all the way through to the VPNOne Power product, which is an enterprise-grade security solution. Now, it's this VPNOne Power product that we'll be using in this course, and it's the product that CheckPoint will expect you to know when you plan on sitting their exams. So, whilst in this series we'll be concentrating on VPNOne, specifically what you do need to know to configure and manage your security, and also what you'll need to know for the CCSA exam. Now, VPNOne is really a suite of products, not just a single product, and VPNOne comprises of three primary components. We have the security gateway, the Smart Center server, and smart management. The security gateway is the firewall component itself. Now, you might hear this referred to as the firewall or the security enforcement point, but all of these terms mean the same thing. It's just the firewall that serves to protect your network. Now, the Smart Center server is the central repository of your security policies. This is the server that holds all of the firewall rules, the policies, the database, and objects that make up the security configuration for VPNOne. Now, this is the server where you'll be configuring VPNOne, and the settings that you define here will be pushed out to your security gateways so that they can enforce the rules that you've defined. Now, the final component is the Smart Console, and this includes various GUI applications such as the Smart Console, Smart Portal, and Smart View Tracker and Monitor, and we're going to talk about these things over the course of these videos. Now, when we come to install these various components, you will have a choice of performing either a standalone or a distributed installation. When you choose a standalone installation, you'll be installing all three components on the same server as long as it's a Windows server that you're using. But in a distributed installation, at the very least, the security gateway will be on its own machine with the Smart Console and the Smart Center server on another Windows server. Now, if you are planning on clustering your security gateways for redundancy, then you will need to deploy a distributed installation, and that's what we'll be doing in these videos. We're going to put the security gateway or the firewall on one server and install the Smart Console and the Smart Center on a separate server. Now, in order to install our VPNOne Smart Center server, security gateway, or the Smart Console, you're going to need to meet the following hardware requirements, which I might add are pretty low. You'll need at least a 300 MHz Pentium 3 CPU or higher, around 10 gig of hard disk space, a minimum of 256 megs of RAM, although 512 is recommended, at least one network card, a CD-ROM to install the product from, and a display that's capable of running 1024 by 768 resolution. Now, these are ridiculously low hardware requirements, and you should easily be able to exceed them even with the oldest hardware you have lying around. And with these low requirements, you probably won't be surprised to learn that VPNOne works fine in a virtualized environment using VMware ESX Server and also Microsoft's Hyper-V as well. Now do bear in mind though that if you are planning on using newer hardware with VPNOne, which is obviously a good idea, since like with any product really, the faster it is, the better it will perform, and in most cases, the more reliable it'll be. But take note though that VPNOne is licensed on a per core basis. So if you are using a single core CPU, then VPNOne will only use that single core. However, if you have a dual core CPU or a quad core CPU, then VPNOne will still only make use of the single core, with the other cores only being used by the host operating system unless you license the additional cores. And you can find more out about licensing additional cores by visiting CheckPoint's website. Now, another factor to keep in mind is that if you plan on clustering your gateways, you will need to ensure that each machine is running the same host operating system and has identical software on it, such as the same hotfixes and so forth. And as far as hardware goes, just make sure that both machines are supported on the hardware compatibility list, and you can get that from CheckPoint, then you should be fine. Alright, well, we're going to wrap up this first video here so we can get stuck into the next video where we'll install our first security gateway and both the Smart Console and the Smart Center server. In this introductory video, we've talked about what components make up a CheckPoint VPNOne security solution, and remember that these components can all live on the same server when you choose a standalone configuration or separate ones with a distributed installation, and that's a good idea if you have multiple gateways to manage so they won't affect the performance of the Smart Center server by separating these roles out. Or perhaps you might be planning on clustering your security gateways. Now we also talked about the hardware requirements, which are pretty minimal, and pretty much any old hardware that you have lying around should function pretty well. So if you have old hardware that's not in use, now's a good time to pull it out and incorporate it into your CheckPoint security solution. We hope you enjoyed this video and would like to thank you for supporting Winstructor.